I'm Jeff Pospisil, the 10-Minute Treasurer, with practical advice for improving your church's financial future. This video is a continuation of my Art of Being Cheap series. So I'm a cheap accountant, and I know that's redundant, but I just have a knack for being cheap, and I wanted to share with you some of those nuggets of wisdom for whatever they're worth. And this one, we're going to talk specifically about how to travel on the cheap. And this is business travel on the cheap. So not vacation travel, though you might have other ideas on that, but I'm talking specifically business travel. So if you're a pastor or an employee of a church or a volunteer, how do you travel on the cheap to save money? So as part of my job as the conference treasurer for the Dakotas United Methodist Church, I get to travel all over North and South Dakota. And the cheaper I am, the more I money I have to travel. So that's kind of my motivation there. The more freedom I have to travel if I'm cheap when I travel. So the first one is on sleeping thrifty. So let's say you have to travel and stay overnight somewhere for work. Um, I know some people that are really good about hunting for a cheap hotel. You know, they go to Priceline or something like that and they find a cheap hotel. Other people, maybe they share a hotel room, but I take it a step further. I went years traveling North and South Dakota without ever um, paying for a hotel room. And that's because I normally called up a pastor friend or somebody that I hope would be my friend and asked if I could stay with them if they'd put me up. And so I'm staying for free. So this is actually Kermit Culver's old parsonage in Bismarck. And I remember he put me up for 4 or 5 nights during the annual conference, which would have cost at least $500 if I was staying there. So it saved me $500 on my travel budget. And you might say, well, that doesn't seem um, why would you do that? Maybe it might be the question besides the savings. But I mean, first of all, you stay with a pastor or a friend or somebody you want to be your friend. Um, Likely it's cleaner. You're not having all that travel, so you're not risking bed bugs and all that other kind of stuff. Or contagious diseases, I guess. I'm filming this during the pandemic, so there's less chance of that. Another reason, likely you'll get a continental breakfast, maybe even a continental dinner. How many hotels give a continental dinner? And another thing is, if you value relationships, it's very hard to grow your relationship if you're just talking to somebody just real briefly. But you spend the time in a house and you're in your pajamas, you have time to talk, and there's not as much pressure either in that, but it just naturally lends itself to relationship building. So not only am I saving money, I'm strengthening relationships. I'm actually healthier for doing it. So there's just a lot of pluses for that. And yeah, when I think about the places where I've stayed, it has been a blessing for me, and hopefully it was a blessing for them as well. So the next one is on riding thrifty. So how do we cut our costs when it comes to transportation expenses? There's a story behind this car. I'll tell it in a second. But for a lot of our pastors, volunteers, staff, you might have to travel. Maybe it's for visitation, or maybe you have multiple churches, so you're traveling in between churches. And whenever you use your personal vehicle for work purposes, you should be reimbursed the IRS standard mileage rate. So, and that's currently right around 50 cents per mile. And that might not sound expensive, but for me, um, as a cheap accountant, that is kind of spendy. And so my thought was, how can I cut this? And so this is actually our very first fleet vehicle that we had for our office in Mitchell. And it's a 1998 Toyota Corolla. I bought it in 2010 from Elmer Brinkman. So we named the car Elmer, and it looked much better than this when I bought it. It had maybe 120,000 miles, and I bought it for $500. And that was very cheap because you had to use a bungee cord to keep that thing in fifth gear. So imagine you're trying to get up to speed on the interstate and you have to take both hands off the wheel so you can put a bungee cord over the gear shift. So anyway, I rode this car for 4 years. I think about 40,000 miles we put on it. I hit a deer on the interstate and I still rode it after that. I just had them fix it up enough so I could shut the hood. It went through a hailstorm. We had to replace a window. And after 4 years, 40,000 miles, I sold that car for $500. Bought it for $500, sold it for $500. So, and I did the math later on. We saved about $2,500 a year off our travel budget. So $2,500 a year ended up being about $10,000 is what we saved. So that is awesome. Um, but here's the thing. So you can do this. There are people that are would donate a vehicle to the church, or the church might be able to buy it from them for cheap. And that could be the fleet vehicle for your church. And whoever needs to use it could drive it around. And hopefully it's a little safer than this one. I was willing to um, put my money where my mouth is, or my safety where my mouth is, whatever it is. I was willing to take the chance because I believe in again, I wanted to be able to travel to more churches, and if I cut my expenses down, I could do that. So anyway, that's the idea. If you provide a fleet vehicle, if you're able to find a very affordable vehicle, you could do this. And the last one is on eating thrifty. So if you're traveling for work and that the time you're away, you come across a meal time, how do you save money on those food expenses? And I've evolved on this one over the years. Initially, I would just never turn in my expenses. So that's the weird thing. I'm cheap personally, but I'm even cheaper towards the conference. So or my work. I would just not turn in my food expenses, and I would eat cheap too. I mean, I would eat at McDonald's, usually spend $4 or $5 on a meal. Anyway, uh, the other thing I do, and I don't think I did this in a premeditated way, but I when people would invite me to go out for a meal, I'm slow to pick up the check. So I apologize if you think I'm doing that on purpose. That's just my nature. I'm just slow to pick up a check, and a lot of times I'm going out there to help somebody, and so that's their way of showing their appreciation anyway. So I'm kind of fine with that. It costs them $5, $10 for my services, and they feel good about it, and I feel fed. But lately, over the last few years, I've started packing a meal. So this is my actual lunch box. And the key for this is if you want to follow through with this consistently, um, pack your meal, pack your lunch ahead of time. So pack it the night before. Decide on it the night before because it's so much more difficult to follow through with packing your lunch early in the morning when you got a bunch of other stuff you got to think about. So, but then you save a ton of money. Personally, you're saving your church or the conference, in my case, 100% of the cost. So that ends up being a great thing to do. If you're traveling for a day or two, packing a meal is an awesome way to do it. And if somebody does pick up the check for you, then you have a snack for the ride home. So anyway, so hopefully this helps you. And again, this is a ministry of the Dakotas United Methodist Conference, the finance office, as well as the Dakotas United Methodist Foundation. So, and you can find more of our stuff at dakotasumc.org. All right, till next time.